The evidence is undeniable. We found hundreds of chariots and skeletons at the bottom of the Red Sea.
For decades, the story of the Red Sea crossing lived mostly in the realm of faith, theology, and cinematic imagination. But every now and then, a discovery bubbles up from the deep, literally, and rekindles one of history's most debated mysteries. That's exactly what happened when a team of divers exploring an isolated section of the Red Sea stumbled across remains that looked shockingly out of place on the ocean floor.
Is there any physical evidence on the seabed? Yes, there is, and we have some examples. Skeletons of humans, skeleton parts of horses and bulls, chariot wheels, and strange structures, possibly axles, wagons, and parts of chariots.
The legend and the long-standing debate. The story of the Red Sea crossing is one of the most dramatic narratives in ancient literature. According to the book of Exodus, the Israelites fled Egypt after generations of slavery, pursued by Pharaoh's elite chariot forces. Trapped between the sea and the advancing army, they witnessed a miraculous event. The waters split, forming towering walls on both sides. The Israelites crossed on dry ground, but when Pharaoh's chariots followed, the sea allegedly collapsed, swallowing the army in a single devastating moment. For believers, this stands as a defining act of divine intervention. For historians, it remains one of antiquity's greatest puzzles. Scholars have debated the historical basis of the Exodus for decades. One challenge is the absence of clear, direct archaeological inscriptions recording a mass departure of Hebrew slaves. Ancient Egypt documented victories, building projects, and royal lineages meticulously, but disasters or humiliations were rarely preserved in official records, leaving a gap that fuels both skepticism and cautious possibility. Different interpretations place the Exodus anywhere between the 15th and 13th centuries BCE, depending on how biblical timelines are matched to Egyptian history. Each proposed date aligns with different pharaohs, landscapes, and political climates. Geographically, researchers disagree on the exact body of water associated with the event. The phrase Red Sea in modern language does not perfectly match ancient translations, which refer to the Yam Suf, meaning Sea of Reeds. This opens the possibility that the crossing may have occurred in regions north of the modern Red Sea, including lakes and marshes within the ancient Nile Delta. Yet, the Red Sea itself remains a compelling candidate because of its deep waters, fast-moving currents, and historical significance as a major route for military and trade expeditions. Over the years, a handful of underwater anomalies, collapsed land bridges, and sudden wind-driven water recession events have sparked renewed discussions. None have provided definitive proof, but each has kept the question alive. Could a natural event timed with astonishing precision explain the ancient narrative? And if so, could remnants of a military force still survive? These lingering questions continue to draw explorers, divers, and researchers back to the region, searching for evidence that might finally bridge the divide between scripture, history, and science. The dive that reignited global curiosity didn't begin as an archaeological mission. It started as a routine exploration along a lesser-visited stretch of the Red Sea, an area known for steep drop-offs, rich coral ecosystems, and shipwrecks ranging from medieval trade vessels to modern fishing boats. The dive that started it all. The diving team, made up of underwater photographers and marine researchers, set out to document coral formations that thrive in deeper, quieter waters. The visibility that day was unusually clear, revealing vast, sloping terrain beneath them as they descended. As the divers approached the seabed, they noticed something that didn't blend naturally with the surrounding landscape, a circular structure, partially wrapped in thick coral. At first glance, it looked like a typical coral growth, but the symmetry caught their attention. Coral tends to grow irregularly, bending and spreading based on water flow and available surfaces. This object, however, maintained a smooth, wheel-like outline beneath the organic covering. Still, wheels are not uncommon in waters that have seen centuries of maritime travel. The divers initially assumed it could be a fragment from an old ship's equipment, or a part of a submerged cart from coastal trade activities. Curiosity pushed them further along the slope, where they encountered additional shapes, multiple circles arranged in a loose line, each one encrusted heavily but retaining a recognizable form beneath the coral layers. The spacing struck them as unusual. Objects scattered by sinking ships tend to fall randomly, often piling together or drifting with currents. But these circular forms appeared positioned in a way that suggested they had once been aligned. Deeper into the site, the team found small bone fragments also fused into coral. Underwater remains are notoriously difficult to identify on site. Bones could belong to animals transported by ancient traders, victims of shipwrecks, or even natural marine deposits. Still, the presence of bones so close to the circular objects compelled the team to document everything meticulously. They marked coordinates, captured wide-angle footage, and took close-up photographs for later analysis. By the time they resurfaced, the divers were unsettled, not because they believed they had uncovered Pharaoh's chariots, but because the arrangement didn't resemble typical shipwreck debris. It felt older, quieter, and out of place. They shared the footage with researchers who had previously studied Red Sea anomalies, not expecting much. But the moment Egyptologists and marine archaeologists saw the images, their reactions shifted. Even without conclusions, it was clear the site deserved closer attention, and it had the potential to reopen a very old conversation. When the expert arrived, when the footage reached specialists, the first reactions were cautious. Egyptologists, marine archaeologists, and geologists are used to reviewing underwater anomalies. Many turn out to be natural formations, coral illusions, or remnants of unrelated shipwrecks. Yet something about this material prompted them to pause. The clarity of the video, the spacing of the circular objects, and the presence of bones drew in experts who rarely agree on anything related to the Exodus. Their initial meeting was meant to be routine, but as the images played on a large monitor, the room gradually fell silent. The first point of discussion was the circular shapes. Marine archaeologists noted that coral can grow over almost any object and distort its appearance, but beneath the incrustation, the forms displayed a uniformity that resembled wheels, or at least wheel-like structures. Egyptologists recognized the general proportions of ancient Egyptian chariot wheels, which typically ranged between 80 and 100 centimeters in diameter and were made from wood reinforced with leather bindings. Of course, identifying anything definitively from coral-covered silhouettes is impossible, but the experts acknowledged that the shapes were consistent with what would be expected from chariot components of that era. The bone fragments raised additional questions. Underwater bones deteriorate quickly unless protected by sediment or coral. In this case, the coral had encased them, preserving both shape and density. Determining whether the bones belonged to humans or animals required laboratory analysis, which had not yet been conducted. Still, the proximity of the bones to the wheel-like objects added weight to the possibility that the debris did not come from ordinary cargo or a merchant vessel. Chariots, in ancient contexts, were rarely transported without soldiers or horses. Then came the geographic discussion. The location of the anomaly fell within a corridor that some scholars consider a plausible route for the Exodus scenario, though this remains highly debated. The modern Red Sea coastline has shifted dramatically over thousands of years due to geological uplift, subsidence, and changing water levels. Because of this, ancient shorelines were different, and some submerged areas may once have been shallower plains or crossing points. The experts acknowledged that the site's position made it worthy of further investigation, but not conclusive proof of anything tied to the biblical account. Despite their professional skepticism, the specialists agreed on one thing. The site did not resemble an ordinary shipwreck, nor did the arrangement look random. It carried the unmistakable signature of a structured event, something assembled, aligned, and later overtaken by natural forces. And that alone justified deeper, more rigorous study, setting the stage for even larger questions about what truly happened beneath those waters. The question at the center of the debate was the one no expert wanted to ask too quickly. Could these remnants, if confirmed as ancient, belong to an Egyptian military force? Could it really be Pharaoh's army? It was a possibility that hovered silently over every discussion. While no one was prepared to make bold declarations, several details sparked genuine curiosity. The proportions of the circular objects beneath the coral aligned with what is known about Egyptian chariot wheels from the Late Bronze Age. These chariots, used by Pharaoh's elite forces, were lightweight, fast, and designed for open terrain, constructed from wood, leather, and bronze fittings. If such materials were submerged and later encased in coral, they could theoretically take on the shapes seen in the footage. Supporters of the theory pointed to additional clues. First, the region of the Red Sea where the anomaly was found does not correspond with known shipwreck sites from major trade routes. Merchant vessels typically followed predictable paths, hugging coastlines or stopping at documented harbors, none of which were near this remote area. Second, some geological studies have suggested that ancient tsunamis, seabed shifts, or rare wind-driven water recession events could have exposed land temporarily before rapidly flooding it again. While none of these models directly prove the Exodus narrative, they demonstrate that dramatic coastal changes were not impossible in antiquity. Another argument came from coral growth rates. Coral often takes centuries to form substantial outer layers around an object. The thickness seen in the footage suggested extreme age, certainly older than modern debris, possibly even ancient. But coral growth varies widely based on temperature, depth, and water movement, making it an imperfect dating method. Nonetheless, the age estimates supported the idea that the objects were not recent. Still, the counter-arguments were strong and grounded in caution. Marine biologists reminded the team that coral frequently mimics man-made shapes, creating natural illusions of wheels, columns, or beams. Without removing coral, which raises ethical and legal issues, identification remains speculative. Archaeologists, too, warned against connecting the find too quickly to biblical events. Egypt's military at the time used similar materials and designs for transportation, hunting, and ceremonial chariots. Even if the wheels were ancient and Egyptian, they might not be linked to a battle or a dramatic disappearance. There was also the long-standing academic challenge. No archaeological evidence has definitively tied the Exodus story to a specific date or pharaoh. Without a historical anchor point, connecting any discovery to that narrative becomes even more difficult. And since Egypt rarely recorded its defeats, especially catastrophic ones, there was little textual material to compare with any new find. Yet despite all the caution, one detail continued to intrigue both skeptics and believers: the alignment. The objects appeared to sit in a loosely parallel formation, more consistent with a group in motion than with a ship breaking apart. That formation, paired with the presence of bones, left the impression of a sudden collapse rather than a slow sinking. It didn't prove the theory, but it made the question impossible to ignore. Underwater forensic, what the seabed revealed. Once the site was mapped in more detail, marine archaeologists turned their attention to the seafloor itself. Underwater landscapes can tell stories just as clearly as ruins on land. And the arrangement of objects often reveals more about an event than the objects alone. By analyzing the footage frame by frame, experts noticed that the circular forms appeared in a gently curving line, following the natural slope of the seabed. This pattern hinted that the objects had not simply fallen randomly. Instead, they seemed as if they had once been positioned in a formation before being overtaken by water and time. The distribution of bone fragments provided additional clues. They were not scattered widely, as one might expect from debris moved by strong undercurrents. Instead, they were located relatively close to the wheel-like structures. This proximity suggested that whatever the remains belonged to, human or animal, they were likely associated with the same event. Horses, for instance, were a key component of ancient chariot forces. If a military unit or transport caravan had been caught in a sudden flood, the humans, animals, and equipment would have been swept together in the same surge. Researchers also studied sediment layers visible in the footage. Certain fine sediments accumulate only in low-energy environments, which means the current at that depth is relatively weak. If the objects had rolled, drifted, or been dragged over centuries, those layers would have been disturbed. Instead, much of the seabed appeared undisturbed, indicating that the items rested close to where they originally settled. This added weight to the idea of a rapid submersion event rather than a slow sinking. To better understand the possible scenario, oceanographers modeled how a sudden, powerful influx of water might behave across ancient coastlines. In such an event, anything on the exposed land, people, animals, vehicles, could be swept forward, then dropped abruptly as the water retreated. The resulting layout would look strikingly similar to what divers saw: aligned objects, compact clusters, and minimal drift. While these forensic observations did not confirm a specific historical moment, they painted a compelling picture. The seabed bore the characteristics of a violent, fast-moving event, one that engulfed a group traveling together, caught off guard by a sudden, overwhelming force of nature. The global uproar. When the footage and preliminary analysis quietly circulated among academic circles, it didn't take long for word to reach the public. The moment images of the coral-covered shapes and bone fragments appeared online, the reaction was immediate. Some called it the greatest archaeological hint of the century. Others dismissed it as exaggerated interpretations of natural formations. Regardless of belief, the world was suddenly paying attention to a previously obscure section of the Red Sea. Documentarians contacted the diving team, hoping to secure exclusive access to their footage. YouTube channels dedicated to archaeology, history, and biblical mysteries produced videos dissecting every frame, while forums filled with amateur analyses that ranged from insightful to wildly speculative. Religious communities responded with particular intensity. For many, the idea that underwater formations might align with one of the most dramatic moments recorded in Scripture felt both affirming and awe-inspiring. Some interpreted the discovery as potential historical validation of a narrative long defended on faith alone. Others saw it as an opportunity for deeper dialogue between faith and science, urging scholars to investigate with seriousness while resisting premature conclusions. On the other side, professional archaeologists urged restraint. While acknowledging the site's unusual features, they reminded the public that many promising discoveries have turned out to be natural formations or unrelated artifacts. Several experts warned against tying any single anomaly too closely to a specific biblical event, especially one with a complex and debated historical background. They emphasized the need for controlled excavation, detailed mapping, and multidisciplinary analysis, none of which could be done quickly. Government authorities also became involved, as the waters in question fall under strict regulations designed to protect marine ecosystems and archaeological heritage. Any physical disturbance of coral-covered objects requires extensive permissions, scientific justification, and environmental safeguards. This meant that despite growing public pressure for immediate answers, further investigation would move slowly. In just a few weeks, the discovery evolved from an obscure underwater observation to a global conversation, one that bridged faith, science, history, and human curiosity. And with that spotlight came a single, unavoidable question: would deeper study bring clarity, or only more mystery? Limit of proof. Even with extraordinary footage and careful analysis, the underwater site beneath the Red Sea remains a mystery. Coral incrustation, water currents, and centuries of sediment make precise identification difficult. Bones fused with coral cannot yet be definitively dated without sophisticated laboratory techniques, which themselves are constrained by the fragile nature of the materials. Similarly, the wheel-like structures could be remnants of ancient Egyptian chariots or natural formations distorted over time. While the arrangement hints at purposeful alignment, underwater archaeology is notoriously challenging. and caution is critical to avoid overinterpretation. Technology offers some hope, but also illustrates the limits of current investigation. High-resolution sonar mapping can reveal shapes and patterns, but it cannot identify composition or exact age. Submersible robotic cameras allow closer inspection, yet removing coral to study underlying material risks, destroying both evidence and the surrounding ecosystem. Radiocarbon dating requires careful sampling, but even then, the results may only indicate the age of the surrounding material, not the object itself. These constraints mean that, for now, the site can only be studied indirectly, leaving room for multiple interpretations. The unanswered questions are as compelling as the possible answers. Were these objects truly part of a military force? Did they belong to a single catastrophic event? Or are they layered across centuries? Could natural forces alone explain their arrangement, or was human activity involved? Each scenario remains plausible, yet none can be confirmed with absolute certainty. And yet, the very existence of these anomalies challenges scholars, divers, and curious minds alike to keep searching, questioning, and exploring. Beyond the scientific and historical considerations, the site captures the human imagination. For millennia, the story of the Red Sea crossing has straddled myth and history. It has inspired faith, art, literature, and scholarship. This underwater landscape, with its silent coral-covered remnants, offers a tangible link to that ancient narrative, even if the precise details remain elusive. It reminds us that the past is not always neatly recorded, and that mysteries often survive where human eyes rarely venture. In a sense, the Red Sea itself has become a guardian of secrets. The seabed, frozen in time, preserves not only physical objects, but the tension between legend and reality. Each bone fragment, each circular outline, tells part of a story, of ancient human endeavor, sudden disaster, and the inexorable passage of time. Whether or not Pharaoh's army lies beneath those waves, the site embodies the profound human drive to seek answers, to explore the unknown, and to reconcile what we believe with what we can prove. As the divers' footage continues to circulate and scholars plan future studies, the mystery remains alive. It is a reminder that history is rarely straightforward, and that even a single underwater anomaly can reignite centuries of debate. The Red Sea may never fully reveal its secrets, but it has already challenged our assumptions, stirred our curiosity, and reignited a conversation that bridges science, faith, and imagination. In the quiet depths, the story continues, unanswered, enigmatic, and profoundly compelling. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe and click on the next video shown on your screen.